and welcome to a brand new episode of Happy Mum, Happy Baby, the podcast. Today's guest is a freelance interior stylist, and I've got to say, when she posts pictures of her home onto her Instagram account, every single little detail is incredible and I love it. I don't think I've ever seen interiors quite like it, that everything is there with a purpose, and I absolutely love it. I adore it. She's also the mother of 3. It's Africa Daley-Clarke. Hello.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, G. I appreciate it.
Honestly, your home is immense.
I'll never forget, I got a notification from you when I'd just done my bathroom, and I think I nearly smashed my phone. I was like, what? I'm pretty sure I put it on my stories, but yeah, that was lovely. Thank you.
But it's amazing. Like, even the other day, you posted something about there was an image of your, like, the dummies and the bottles and everything. It's just so in keeping with the style that you've got going on. Nothing is there without purpose.
Yeah, we're tight on space, and I've learned that is the only way to not go out of your mind, to just not fill the house with things that you don't need, and to make sure that if there's something that we do need, as mundane as it can be, somebody will have made it in my taste, if that makes sense. So,
but you know how some accounts you kind of go, well, that's their nice corner.
Oh yeah.
And you never see the rest of the house. I don't feel like that happens with you. Well, I feel like you could do a 360.
Yeah, no, it can be a mess, but definitely I think every inch of the house has been shown. Even my husband was saying to me, it's a good job we've got nothing worth robbing, because we've basically given the robbers like a blueprint of our home. I think literally every corner's been shown, but yeah.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. It makes me very happy to look at what you've done with your home. Where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Oh, I grew up in Camden. So I was born in Yorkshire, just about. My mum's from Yorkshire, and she went up to visit her mum and had me there. And then it was literally like straight back down on the train. So yeah.
Were you really early?
I don't think I was early. I think my mum knew what she was doing, and she needed her mum to be by her side. But yeah, pretty much all of my life in North London, Camden, or Islington, in between. And I've just kind of stayed here, like thereabouts. Really, really big family. There's a lot of us. There's 13 children between my parents.
Wow.
Yeah. And 6 of us were raised in the same house. So we're literally like as close can be without getting on each other's nerves.
What is the age range there?
So my eldest brother is 34, I'm 30, and the youngest is 18. So it's not too huge either.
Yeah. So there's enough gap. I mean, we've got 3. I think our gaps with our 3 kids are the same.
Yeah.
So yours are now 5, 3, and 7 months.
That's right. Yeah.
And mine are 7, 5, and 2.5.
You've done it all.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So you're like 2 years behind me. So I know exactly where you're at. But your mum, it seems like they've spaced it out enough, so like the older ones could kind of look after the younger ones.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like I did my bit in helping in some way, and I would love that help now, but at least I think that maybe I've got it to come. So yeah.
Yeah, just keep going, Africa.
Yeah, keep going.
Maybe in 10 years time.
I need the helpers. Yeah.
And did you ever think ahead to your life and you as a mum? Is that something that you always wanted to be?
I'll say yes. And I think maybe because I'd thought I was going to do so well at it, that the reality was such a shock for me.
But you would have had younger children in the house when you were growing up. So you would have had that hands-on experience.
Yeah, I did all the babysitting, I did all the nappies, and I think I let that delusion like really get to my head. Sorry, because I thought it'd be a breeze, and it wasn't. And so I think the first birth just hit me so hard, because it was nothing like I could have imagined.
Well, I guess so. We'll get to your birth, but I guess that is a huge thing as well, because even though you would have had that sibling relationship, you wouldn't have had to do the physical aspects of being a mum, in terms of giving birth and feeding and even just being up in the night. Like, as a sibling, you're able to just sleep in your bed. Like we both know, siblings very rarely wake siblings up, even if they're in the same room. They are just like, Buddy can be having a night terror and Buzz will sleep through it, even though he's screaming in his face. Whereas I think that it's very different when it's your baby, and that the effect that it has on your body, your
Massively.
mind, you know. So when did you decide this is it? This is the time we're going for this. And obviously you and your husband, were you both on the same page straight away?
Yeah, we were luckily. We had thought that there would have been fertility issues. I mean, there were fertility issues. We had thought it would have taken longer, to fall
Yeah.
pregnant. Um, my husband had quite a serious case of either mumps or measles, whatever one it was that affects fertility, I forget, when he was an adult,
Right.
that resulted in hospitalization. And then I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so we just kind of had our head wrapped around the idea that when we were ready to try, to not get our hopes up too much,
Yeah.
which is fine. And we were actually both very open to the idea of adoption. We spoke about that a lot. So even though it felt like a while, maybe like a year, I think it still was such a shock, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, nothing does prepare you for it. So you say that you're ready and you say that you're trying, you have those discussions. I mean, I've been on the pill since I was 15. So even like planning that aspect of it as well. But I think it still just came as such a shock.
Well, and also because so I'm the same as you. I just thought it would take so long, and you know, you spend years going, mustn't get pregnant, mustn't get pregnant, mustn't get pregnant, and then there is still that thing within you that you're just like,
Yeah.
like you're so shocked, even though you know that that's what you've been aiming for,
Yeah.
that's what you've been hoping for. How did you feel when that test said pregnant, or those two lines appeared?
Immediate excitement. And I think maybe it was from that time that things started going a little bit downhill, because I remember FaceTiming my best friend from the toilet. And I knew I should have told Jamal first. I remember FaceTiming my best friend and she was over the moon for me. And then I remember that obviously I couldn't wait to tell Jamal in person, and I knew that he would be over the moon as well. But then I think that realization that there was no one else to share that happiness with immediately. I think when you come from a big family, but are not necessarily, or at the time anyway, able to share wins in that way, because of the varied age group, my family are all living their life.
Yeah.
You know, it's not this thing of there's just a few of us and we can't wait for the first grandchild or anything like that. It wasn't that. And I think that maybe like isolation kicked in quite soon on that realization.
And did that just slowly build throughout your pregnancy, do you think?
Yes. I remember going to the doctors for bad migraines. I mean, really, really bad. I get migraines now, but a week long. And I was working full time. Now I'd literally go into work. I was managing like a nice little store, and I'd put sheets of cardboard down on the toilet and I just lay down on the floor because my migraines are that bad. And I remember going into the doctors and saying like, yeah, I can't really cope at the moment with these migraines. And I thought I was going in to get help with the migraines, and I left, and she kind of like already diagnosed me before giving birth with postnatal depression.
Yeah.
It was just very apparent. I must have just offloaded on her, which was good in a way, because they kind of, you know, they put that in your file and they're supposed to look out for that. And I had already had things that had put me as high risk, that I would be predisposed to postnatal depression. But that didn't make it any easier, because then I had this dread of giving birth when I started to look into it more, that maybe this is going to be 10 times worse once baby's here. And I never really was able to get ahead of that feeling, to be honest. Yeah.
I imagine if you're already feeling awful, that I did, especially at a point where you know that everyone else is saying to you, oh, you must be so excited, or, you know, all these joyful things that you're meant to be feeling. And when you're not feeling that, you're feeling quite the opposite. You must almost dread what's coming, because you must feel like it's just going to get worse than this.
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard. It was a hard time, to be honest. And I didn't have anyone in my family to talk to about pregnancy. I didn't have anyone to talk to about how they handled depression. Lots of people in my family suffer from depression. We know that, but we don't talk about it. We know it.
Okay.
It's not shameful, but we kind of just all acknowledge that we're all going through our own things as well, and give each other space like that. So yeah, it was a difficult time. And
were you able to connect with the pregnancy at all?
No. I think I've got 2 bump pictures. one somebody else took of me at the baby shower. Yeah, so I wasn't able to have that kind of pregnancy. But maybe because I wasn't anticipating it so much, I didn't feel robbed of that either.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what were you like going into the actual birth? Was that because I feel like so many of us just focus on that. We don't
Yeah.
actually think about what's to come after.
Yeah.
But were you someone that was fearful of it? Did you do hypnobirthing?
We did hypnobirthing.
You did.
We scraped that 300 pounds together. We were so broke, but we scraped it together. We're so glad that we did, because it kind of gave my husband a role.
Yeah.
And we had a great practitioner. She was very realistic. She had had a C-section while she had also practiced hypnobirthing. So she gave us all the scenarios. And we went in very in control. I went to 2 weeks over, so there's that doubt already. You're thinking, oh, I'm probably not going to be able to get a water birth, not going to be able to do other things that I want to do. But the birth was just horrific.
No.
Yeah, it was horrific. I won't even go into detail just in case someone is pregnant now, but it was so bad. It was very drawn out. You know, they had to do all the stages of induction, which I appreciate now with hindsight. And they try to do things as natural as possible. And then when this doesn't work, they let it run its course. And it wasn't offered any pain relief. And my husband got quite annoyed at one stage, and she was like, you put it in your hypnobirthing booklet that you didn't want to be offered pain relief. You don't think about things like that, do you?
No, you don't. Because also you read the books and you're kind of like, well, that's going to be me. And this, you know, my body's meant to be doing it. It's fine. And you don't, I think, so I did hypnobirthing, and I think for me, it's all about kind of allowing yourself to accept that anything's going to happen and that you can't control it.
Absolutely.
And to just be as calm as possible in whatever situation arises.
Yeah.
But I do think there is also that part of you that wants to remain a purist, especially before it actually starts.
Yes.
You know, and so I get that. I get that it would have been on your notes, but did you at any point did you get drugs?
Yeah, I had diamorphine, which is great. Had that in the bum twice. and there's a 12-hour gap between when you're allowed it. That's how long my labour was. It was shocking. And then, I had to have an epidural, which I felt was tragic, but obviously isn't. And my best friend was in the room. And then my mum, who didn't want anything to do with the birth, just turned up at the hospital. And the doctor was like, well, you can only have your best friend or mum, because obviously you want your husband there.
Yeah.
So they had to keep tag teaming, and my husband was trying to negotiate my mum out of the room.
What was it like, though, seeing your mum when you're in that position? Was there something that was kind of like comforting in having her there? No,
there wasn't.
This is not the plan, Mum.
Yeah, and I think hypnobirthing, you try to be so much in control, don't you?
Yeah.
So that threw me. My best friend was leaving for a flight at 9 a.m, which she booked because it was like 2.5 weeks after the due date. So she thought she was absolutely fine. And in the end, I think I just wanted Jamal. So my best friend sat through the epidural with me because that was really hard on Jamal, knowing that I really didn't want it. But basically, because of the final strategy that they'd planned to deliver baby, they just said, you're not going to be able to take the pain. You know, when they give you the drip hormone to increase contractions.
Yeah.
So we did that. And I had signed, for personal health reasons, I had signed long before a no blood waiver. Mm-hmm. They sit you down with a psychologist, they sit you down with a hemoglobin specialist. You can't just walk into a hospital and say no blood. They really do, well before hormones get involved, they talk you through all the options. So I'd signed this, and I had 4 different doctors come in and tell me, you need to sign a new declaration saying you're going to accept blood. And I said, I'm not doing this in this state. Like, that's why I was glad I had my husband there for me to advocate. But they were basically saying that it had to be a C-section, and they didn't feel comfortable doing a C-section without that. And I just basically said, unfortunately, the whole reason why we did this whole thing was that you guys have signed that you have all of the alternatives in stock. I'm sorry. So in the end, we gave birth in theatre, but it was just forceps.
Right.
So they had planned to the wire cesarean, but obviously tried to avoid it as long as possible. And after it was done, I mean, it was awful. I literally pulled my hypnobirthing eye mask down the whole way through. They kept saying, pull it up, you need. I was like, I don't want to be part of this now. This is so
Yeah.
far removed from. At one point, I had someone doing acupuncture in my feet without my consent. They were just trying everything. I just felt like a cattle at that point. So we're in theatre now. My husband's there, and I'm left after the baby's here. I was left on the table. Obviously, I was having like a reaction to the accumulation of the drugs. I couldn't hold baby. Was shaking quite violently. I was left on the table for 20 minutes while they looked for a missing piece of equipment.
Oh my God.
And my husband's being frantic, but obviously no one can prepare you for what to ask in that scenario. That's not something we'd ever discussed. So my husband did ask what it was, and they said it was a swab. So that made me less frantic. I'd imagine a giant pair of scissors or something was stuck inside me.
You're suddenly be at the airport and beep going through
Exactly.
and be like, oh.
And then all of a sudden they found it.
Right.
And I stayed in hospital for 2 days. And after 2 days, I was in so much pain. I asked the midwife to examine me, and she retrieved the swab. And they never put it on my notes, Giovanna. They never acknowledged it. They never brought a doctor in to discuss why that and how that had happened. It was literally just this nurse that had gone, oh, sorry about that. And I didn't really acknowledge it until this third birth.
Right.
When I sat down again with the hospital team because I had concerns, and I said, I want to talk through this experience. I need to know that shouldn't have happened. It's obviously past, it's not blame game. But if you tell me that that's normal, I'm not giving birth here. Because if you tell me that it shouldn't have happened and that's enough for me, then I can move past that. And of course they were horrified. So only really did I get closure for that until 4 years later when my son was born. But yeah, that really did stay with me. And I think that whole experience, I mean, nothing could have prevented the type of birth that I needed assistance. I gave birth in a fantastic hospital, world-class hospital. But yeah, these things unfortunately can happen. It's possible to not get the support after. And I think their concern was making sure that baby was healthy, which I appreciate. But I very much felt like after that, it was just, yeah. So I don't know what happened for us to be confident enough to have a second.
But also at that point, it's already on your notes.
Yeah.
Your prenatal depression is already on your notes. Someone should have been taking that little bit of extra care to make sure that you were okay. You know, did your GP afterwards talk about what did they ask? No.
GP, no. So the person who first diagnosed my postnatal depression was my health visitor, and only because I wouldn't let her in the house.
Really?
I wouldn't let her in the house. I mean, the house was a mess, but when I say mess, it was actually like filth. It got so out of control. I'm so embarrassed because it's not like now I've got 3 kids around. It was just a baby. The baby wasn't making the mess, but it was shocking. So after the first visit, I didn't let her in. My husband was at work, and he knew something was wrong, and he did absolutely everything in his power to make sure that we were treading water. I mean, absolutely everything. And I really do always feel quite horrified when I look back on that time and realise that although I was going through what I went through, he could have maybe assumed that this was just normal, and so didn't have any clue of what kind of outreach or support he could have had access to. It got to the point his route to work was past the hospital.
Right.
And I remember him saying to me one day, I can't do that journey without feeling sick. And then I realised how much it had affected him as well. Being in that position of, I was quite delirious during it, but having that like helicopter vision and just seeing it all play out. And I think,
and that fear of
exactly, it's
you,
fear,
the woman that he loves and his child, all of that being so out of control in a time where you've tried to find that control with your hypnobirthing and everything like that. It must be so awful for partners.
Yes, I did. I really, really did feel for him. And I think until we realised what it was, until the health visitor was able to say, this is this, and you can have support. We didn't actually get support for it. We were only told what it was, and then we were told where to get support, and I wasn't in a mental capacity to do that. But that was enough, because just understanding that this total disconnect is caused by something was like the turning point at the very least. It wasn't immediate. But it definitely did help. Yeah.
Yeah. How long did it last with you?
So until the health visitor established what it was, I think Israel was like 4 or 5 months, which in hindsight is nothing. I mean, I can't believe my son is 7 months now.
Yeah.
But as I say, that was more just a turning point of us understanding it.
Yeah.
We'd got ourselves in such a bad place. We still needed to kind of like come up for air from that. And really the first thing, so I will share just in case it helps anyone, the health visitor said to me, when you speak to her, how do you feel? I said to her, I don't speak to her. And she said, oh, why not? I said, she's a baby, she doesn't speak. And she said to me, I would really like you to treat her as if this is your friend's child who said, I need you to look after my baby for me.
Yeah.
And that was like the turning point of literally just faking this dialogue when I was doing her nappy or when I picked her up in the morning, when I was getting her clothes on. If you imagine, Giovanna, so my husband who had been at work, 8-hour shift, he'd been out of the house 10 hours a day. There was silence in that time. 5 days a week, pure silence, obviously cries from both of us.
Yeah.
And that was such a, it sounds so obvious. You know, when I see people and they're like talking to their baby mum, we never did anything like that. It just felt so alien to me. And I guess that's why it was so difficult for me to then, once baby was here, I think especially because I didn't hold her straight away and all of that. So that was a real changing point for me. And that was the start of it becoming easier and the bond becoming more established.
How does it make you feel looking back at that time?
I've made peace with it now.
Yeah.
I've made peace with it. I was so guilty for so long. When my second daughter was born, all I could think about was, don't ever let it be like it was before, but also, how is my eldest child going to feel watching me have this great relationship with my second child? I mean, she was only 2. I literally could not, I felt this huge tug of war of, well, you can't be unwell. You cannot be unwell. Like, even if you feel, you know what the signs are now. Even if you feel like it, you also know exactly what you have to do. You have to treat this like a role. You have to do all these amazing things. I went away for 6 weeks. Just me and both girls.
How old were they?
Ezra was 9 weeks.
No.
Yeah, and Israel had just gone 2. And my poor husband was like, don't you should do this.
And also, like, what? That's like one extreme to the other.
I was like,
not leaving the house, not letting anyone in, and then taking them. Where did you go?
Went to Spain. Yeah, I went to Spain. My daughter was in this nursery, which was crippling us, bleeding us dry. So I got over the postnatal depression, but my depression was still quite prevalent. And so I went back to work very early. And we literally decided between us that for the harmony of the family, there wouldn't be any surplus income, but the girls would be in childcare. Childcare that we were happy with, and that would kind of like take away from the guilt from me of what I don't offer them, that sort of thing. And obviously feeling fulfilling at work meant that I could come home and love my kids and like show them the best of me for that concentrated time frame. So this nursery was bleeding us dry. I wasn't seeing any money at the end of the month, like literally not a penny. We was in a 1-bedroom flat with 4 of us living there. The girls were in our room. They'd built a new build flat right in front of our window in that time. So it's like no sunlight. And I said to my husband, I found an Airbnb, which is cheaper than Israel's nursery fees a day. And he was like, okay. I said, I'd really like to
where
go.
are we going with this?
I said, I feel like I need to go. And I think he thought it was a joke for a little while. My sisters thought it was a joke. My mum thought it was a joke. I just thought, I'm not paying this amount of nursery fees. I also don't want to be with just my youngest. I want that opportunity to make up to my eldest. So we found an Airbnb. It was so cheap. It was like £26 a night or something. EasyJet flights. We didn't lose out any money on nursery, basically. I took my eldest out of nursery and we went there. My husband flew with us there to drop us off, and then came back and went to work. And then he came to pick us up at the end. I had my sisters come out to visit for just under a week. I had my best friends come out to visit for a few days. And really, you know, having a husband that was such a supportive structure that would do a full shift, come home, make dinner, right, like scoop me up, like let's do this. I know you're not feeling well, let's do this. We've got to do this, the kids are here now. I felt like I needed to not even give him that opportunity to fall into that role again.
Right.
Because he does it so well. And I needed to be in the middle of nowhere. It was literally middle of nowhere. It was like rural Granada, like mountainous. Yeah. So I did that for 6 weeks.
What was that like? Because obviously that's like dedicated time. I imagine it's a little bit like lockdown 1.
Yes.
Where nothing else is going on and you're focused in on your family.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very similar actually. I'm so glad I did it. I think everybody was expecting me to come home within a week.
Really?
And I could have stayed there forever. It was so surreal. It's like doing an eat, pray, love with your kids. And not feeling like, you know, because that kind of thing, you feel like you've got to go by yourself to find yourself. But I actually I had a sling for every occasion with my newborn, and I just immersed myself with my 2-year-old. So I didn't feel like I was neglecting anyone. And, you know, I got to know my daughter. When my eldest went from childminder to nursery, I had to fill out this form. I couldn't fill it out by myself. I had to get the childminder to help me. I didn't know what her favourite foods were. I didn't know what word she was. I didn't know anything. And that was the guilt all over again of, okay, I've got over the postnatal depression, but my depression is having such an impact on my parenting, even though they might not be feeling it. So I thought, I don't ever want to be in that position again. I want to be able to tell everyone about my child, the ins and outs of them. And honestly, I could not bear the thought of coming back from hospital to that 1-bedroom flat, doing the summer there with no garden, no balcony, no sunlight. I couldn't bear it.
Yeah.
Couldn't bear it. So yeah, we did that and it was amazing. It was just what I needed. And that really helped us have a more of a balance when we came back as well.
Well, it's amazing as well how taking the pressures of everyday life away, how much that can help so much with your mental health and your bond with your children, you know.
I want to be there now.
Do you?
Yeah.
Were you worried going into your second birth, having had? Did anyone talk to you at that point? So if you're saying that you've only just come to terms with what happened first time round, how were you going into labour second time?
We just literally, we didn't do another hypnobirthing course. We just went through all of the materials that we had again, and we were literally just like, how bad can it be? There is no way it's going to be a 3-day labour. It's impossible. It can't happen. Even if it does happen, you've had an epidural before, you've done all of this.
Oh my God, that's pretty amazing. And that was your attitude?
Yeah, well, at the time, I wanted 6 kids. So
so you were like, let's get a move on. We can't be holding back, but let's not look back. Let's look forward.
Exactly. So yeah, we were in a good place, and I also had just like promised my husband, because I kind of like had this okayish track record now of when we'd come back from Spain that I was doing okay and I was managing. And I also just said to him, like, we know what it is now. If we need support, you've got my permission. I'm not going to divorce you if you like run to my sisters and say like, I think she's, you know, in a bad place. Because there's that fear on his side as well. What if it was just baby blues and he's going to tell my family like this side of it? And I kind of just knew what to do if I didn't have that connection.
Yeah.
And the birth wasn't great, but it was very straightforward, very quick. Again, I was 42 weeks. I'd gone right over.
Have you been 42 weeks with all 3?
All 3.
So that is just your normal. That's your normal body.
I've got to come to terms with it now, haven't I? Yeah. And you know what it's like? You get to 34 weeks and you're like, oh yeah, I can't possibly get any bigger. And of course you do.
Oh yes, you can.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. I say that was a very healing birth. It wasn't perfect, and there was a lot of things that shouldn't have happened, but it was very healing after the first one, definitely.
What was it like, the girls meeting each other?
Lovely. Yeah, my sisters came to bring Israel after nursery. I'll just give her a little shout out because she'll listen. So the morning of, it was so quick with Ezra. The morning of, the plan was take Israel to nursery. She used to go for 8 hours, and my sister would collect her and then come to the hospital. It was the day I gave birth was the day I would have had to have been induced, basically. So we
Right.
knew. And I remember getting to the bottom of my lift and calling my sister and saying, change your plans. I'm in labour now. If you could not go to work and meet us at the hospital gates, and we'll literally pass, like Jamel didn't have time to drop Israel anywhere, like we'll meet you
Oh
there.
my gosh.
And my sister on the phone was like, oh, okay. And she stepped into the road and she got hit by a bus, Giovanna.
No.
I'm
Oh
only
my
laughing
gosh.
because every birthday she's like, it's my anniversary. We just had it. She was
How bad
bruised.
was she?
She was only bruised. But
Was she able to come to you, or was she like
she got taken to the same hospital.
I mean, she got a lift.
She got a lift.
So that's good.
Oh my goodness, you can't make it up. Yeah, I'll never forget. So I called her as I was about to get into the lift, and by the time I got out, I got a call back from her, and it was a man, and he was like, "Don't panic." So obviously I was screaming at that stage. It was all good. It was just bruising. She went to hospital to be checked out.
Oh my
crazy.
God.
Yeah.
But she's so lucky as well.
She's so fortunate. She's so fortunate. And I didn't want anyone to know I'd gone into labour because I didn't want the hassle of that family and stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously she then had to tell everyone.
They were all in the hospital for her.
Yeah, this is how it happened. But Ezra was here in like 20 minutes anyway. So,
Really? My second was like that.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you feel like, how did your body cope that time round? Did it behave differently?
Well, I didn't have any drugs. That's a lie. I had gas and air, but I was in control of my body. Whereas the first time round, I mean, I'm teetotal, and then I was hit with all these drugs I'd never had before. So I had no control of my body. So I think just allowing it to, I mean, I was literally like, oh, I need to push now. She was like, there's no way you need to push. And I said, I'm very, very confident that I need to push. I told her I needed to poo. She was like, oh no, that's just pushing. I said, please pass me a bowl. For my husband's sake, just pass me a bowl. Like, I just knew. So I did feel very much in control of my body that time round. Yeah, night and day, birth, night and day.
And what was it like meeting her?
Lovely, because it was just, we was in the birthing suite, whereas obviously the first time it was theatre. I was just like in the room, just able to do what I wanted. They let me stay in the room next door for a full 24 hours, even though everything was fine. Whereas normally they would have asked you to check out quite soon. Whereas after I had Israel, even though it was so traumatic, I was literally just on the labour ward straight after, with just like a tissue paper thing in between us, and baby next door had jaundice and had like a UV light going.
I mean, you'd think, they kind of go, look, guys, we left a swab in her. Should we just bump her up into a different, should we give her a wall? Should we do that because of the swab?
Wouldn't it? The thing is though, with Israel, we had all of that like luxury until the baby was born because it was taking so long.
Right.
So our idea of what was going to happen was so skewed. Jamel had his own bed in the room. It was crazy. And then, obviously, after it was a bit different. But it was very, very peaceful. It was lovely with Ezra.
What was your body like third pregnancy wise?
During the pregnancy?
Yeah.
It was very much like it knew what it was doing. I had a bump when I was literally 8 weeks. I looked visibly pregnant. So I felt confident as well because I felt like my body's telling me it's used to this. So maybe that will apply to birth.
Did you ache though? Because I found that having the other two to sort of run around with, pick them up, do all of that stuff. When I was doing the washing and bend, it was such an effort to get back up again. My body hated me third time round.
And a similar age gap. So I think they're very active ages, aren't they?
Yeah.
But all I will say is that I had most of that pregnancy during lockdown.
Of course.
So that was surreal. I literally, we've got a scrap of like a little like patio outside. I just sat there in the sun. It was hot since April.
Yeah.
I had my feet in a bucket for about 6 months. It was great. And no school runs, which was brilliant.
Yes. So how did that compare? Like COVID, lockdown pregnancy?
It was
bliss.
Yeah.
Really?
I really do feel for anyone who had their first pregnancy in that time. I wouldn't make light of it. that doesn't compare. My best friend actually was pregnant at the time, and we had always planned, oh my gosh, when we're pregnant at the same time, it'd be great. We'll do all this stuff. Didn't get to any of it. And I really felt for her. But for me, who didn't need the very clear things like a baby shower and like go out and buy the pram, I didn't need any of that. I actually loved it.
So what was the labour like this time around? Because now you've had 2 very different pregnancies under your belt. You know not to expect anything because you always get the unexpected. How was it?
So I wasn't a difficult patient at all, but I went into the birth armed.
Right.
Obviously my husband couldn't attend any of the appointments or anything like that. So that was very different. And we had in the gap from Ezra and Isaiah, my youngest, the Embrace report had come out. So we now had all these really harrowing statistics that proved that there was a disparity in healthcare between black birthing people, and Asian women and black birthing people and white women. And I kind of just, all of that retrospectively, you're like, did that factor into my experience? Was it fluke? Was it this? And you really shouldn't play that game because it's done. But what I did do was make sure that I went into every single appointment confident that I would have every question that I was worried about answered. Yeah. It wasn't like you're busy? Okay, I won't ask anything. I was asking everything. With Ezra, this really disappointed me. I had planned a water birth, and then I arrived and they were like, oh, actually, because of your no blood waiver, you can't have a water birth, which isn't true at all. But we wasn't in a position to argue, and it was a quick birth. And I'd always felt a little bit robbed. So I literally had to have like written conversations with the head midwife of the birthing centre. I had to get her to write a declaration to say that although there may be many factors on the day that we can't control, the fact that I've signed this waiver isn't one of them. And that all being well, I should be able to get a water birth. And they did really well to like quell my fears. I called them obviously before I went in, and I walked into the room and saw the pool full, and I just burst out crying. Because obviously my husband wasn't even allowed in the room at that stage. It was like that stage of lockdown. It was like, oh, not until we've examined you. I knew it was going to be another quick birth as well. So
and at that point, had you had a conversation about the first birth and been told that shouldn't have happened? You had.
Yes. So I'd had that in like one of my checkups with my midwife, and so I knew that. But I also, it was the same hospital, but the other hospitals in that area were worse. So I kind of just thought, just go with it. Got in the water, my waters broke, and there was meconium in the water. Unfortunately, had to get straight out. And had to leave the birthing centre. I was okay with it though. I was okay because I knew that they had held up their end of the bargain. They'd let me get in.
It's out of your control. Exactly. It's out of everyone's control.
Exactly. That had sent my anxiety a lot lower.
Yeah.
And then we went to the labour ward, and it all just went a bit Pete-tong. They changed over midwives. And it was just all very hectic, which I understand. My husband was in the room. I still said to him, even though it's hectic, press play, get all the things out. I want everything going. Get it going. So he'd set up my little aromatherapy go. It was so silly. I
love it. It's like you're making a slideshow. What are you switching on? Are you having like a little cinema in there?
Everything going, all my songs. And I don't choose hypnobirthing songs. I choose like my favourite slow R&B, so the nurse.
But that's what it is. It's what makes you happy. It's what makes you feel relaxed.
Exactly.
We don't all want to hear harps.
It's so true. And we've kept the same playlist since the first birth and just like added to it as songs have come out. So it kind of puts us at ease. And very quickly we realised it wasn't going to be straightforward. So basically it was very, very quick. But Isaiah got stuck. So he had something called shoulder dystocia. And the midwife said to me, if you don't do this, the baby's going to go back in. And I was like, I'm not a child. I know that doesn't really happen. And that's when she had like pressed the buzzer and was like, no, I'll explain it to you after. It's really dangerous.
What is it?
So basically the shoulders get stuck, the head is crowned, But because of where the shoulders are, if they don't maneuver the baby out on that push, the baby could literally go back in. And I don't quite understand why that's dangerous, but it's then not, you can't just
I
do it
guess by
again.
that point, there's maybe not enough liquid, or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's called shoulder dystocia. So that happened, and because of that, everyone had to run in. There was an issue with the midwife that we were really upset with how they handled it. So
Right.
upset. This midwife who had just taken us on, it was an older African lady actually, and we felt confident in her care. And she's the one who spotted it with shoulder dystocia. She's the one who's raised the alarm. She you know, we're verbally listening to everything, but we're calm because we know that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And she said, this is what it is, this is what I've seen. I need your support to do X, Y, Z. And a senior midwife said, you need to leave, to the midwife. And she was like, nope, I've got it. She was like, you need to leave. And she like physically like moved her out. And me and my husband were like, this is the only woman we felt safe with. I don't know what's going on, but it's not normal anyway. So baby was delivered, and they had to do like some like really crazy things with my legs to get him out safely, which we appreciate. And after, they all came in and apologized. We didn't even say anything yet. We were like, when this is done, we're gonna. They all came in and apologized. All like senior doctors were like, we're so sorry how we handled that. We thought that this was that. And my husband was just like, yeah, now's not the time. The midwife, we said they needed to apologize to the midwife. The midwife came in and was like, they've apologized to me. Thank you for putting your foot down. I can't believe that's happened.
Did they say why they sent her out?
They misread the situation. And they didn't allow her to explain that she'd got it.
Right.
But what we had said was, you know, in that scary time, you didn't fill us with confidence at all.
Yeah.
And
well, also your mind's not on that. Your mind is on why is that happening?
Yes. So in that short space of time, our midwife had been called out, and she'd said like, oh, she's crowning, I can't come now. And she'd been called out like 3 times, like they're waiting for you. It just got so silly. Anyway, they apologized, and she came in and said they'd apologized. And I've got my notes now, so I've got a bit of closure, and they've called to kind of like acknowledge that they dealt with it really badly. But I had said to them, I understand what level of pain I'm supposed to be in, but what isn't normal is I've got really, really severe pins and needles in one leg. And for the first time in any of my births, I've passed quite a large amount of clots. I've never done that before. And, you know, I'm wearing those like big like nappy knickers. Third time around, you're not doing those like cheap disposable knickers, you're doing like heavy duty. Yeah. So I knew that I was able to say to my midwife, like, look, this isn't normal. It was like, okay, we'll keep an eye on it. So again, the pain is being managed, but this pins and needles is really like getting to me, and it persisted. Gee, I've still got it to this day.
What is it?
They fractured my coccyx in those maneuvers. And like, full disclosure, that can happen, and that's not neglect. That's unfortunately, like, in that scenario, it is very life or death, and I appreciate that. But I wasn't taken seriously for the pain. And it wasn't until Isaiah was 4 months that I even got an MRI scan.
Gosh.
Didn't even get an MRI. Everyone just kept telling me, third baby, you'll have this, you'll have that. You might have a bit of incontinence. Pins and needles could be anything. And now that we know what it is, it's one of those injuries where it's manageable and takes years to heal.
Right.
And you just have to get on with it, which I just find so...
Well, because I guess where it is, it's not like there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. It's actually less painful to walk than it is to sit down.
Really?
Some days it's excruciating, I can't do anything. Other days, my husband would be like, how's your back? I'll be like, oh, didn't feel anything today, really. Still got the pins and needles that haven't left.
Is that not eased up at all?
No. Yeah, it's very, very strange. And I think I just said to my husband that I still actually would love to have 5 kids, but the thought of anything else to my back
Yeah.
Do you know, like you injure yourself and then you see someone do something, like my mum injured her ankle, she broke her ankle, and she says when she sees women wearing high heels, she physically feels sick. Nothing's happened, but she feels sick. I feel like that of anything to do with your back. If someone just like twists or yeah, so the thought of having another birth and having that pressure and risk,
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's seeing, because at the moment you're not healed.
No.
And especially if it's going to take years. I mean, that throws away your 2 year gap.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I said to him, maybe when everything's, you know, he's going to feel, because he still only wants 3. I'm like, you're going to get to a stage when the girl's a bit more grown up, you're going to want 1 more. So maybe by then the back will be fine. But
by that point, you might feel good within yourself
yeah,
and be like, I finally feel good. Do you want to put yourself in that position
it's
again?
true.
You just
Not
never
worth the risk.
know, do you?
Yeah. So I actually feel a lot more closure around that birth because I had a full debrief after.
Right.
Than I did for any other births. I understand that even though it sounds quite horrific, that it could have happened to anyone, it couldn't have been avoided, and that my son's safety was paramount in those moments.
Yeah.
And all that silliness that happened with the midwife didn't actually have any bearing on the end result. So I appreciate that. But yeah, it's also made me really acknowledge that there's no set way to giving birth. There's no, oh, my births are easy or my births are difficult. All I know is that I carry full term and then some.
Yeah.
That's the only similarity I've had.
Do you think the fact that they gave you a proper debrief this time round is part of the reports that came out in terms of,
No, I fought for it.
No.
I fought
Oh, really?
for it. And actually, I had the debrief with a nurse who wasn't present. And I said to her, we need to stop this here because those notes don't correlate with my experience. So I'd like to speak to the actual woman. I knew her name. I wrote it down. I'd like to speak to that head midwife, doctor. Can't remember. Because I want her explanation. I just want to know that they weren't impacted by the other. And I now know that they weren't, but I needed to hear that from someone who was in the room. And I also said to her, your notes weren't accurate. And to the point where she didn't know that I fractured my coccyx. She didn't know any of that. I said to her, when I have another birth, my medical team will rely on your notes. Yeah. It's not about placing blame, but I need to make sure that if I am to have another child, that there's an accurate depiction of what happened and the end result as well. Oh, it was really surreal. I put her on loudspeaker to my husband and he was like, I was giving her all these suggestions of, I said to her, obviously you understand more than I do that shoulder dystocia has XYZ possible side effects. And I said to her, you have a duty of care to follow up to ensure that those things haven't happened because they
never did any checkups
as well. Nothing at all. And she was like, wow, that's a great idea. Thank you so much. I've really got closure after this. And my husband was like, it was very, very, we laughed at the time, but it was very weird. But yeah,
it is incredible as well how people don't know that if they've had traumatic births or they just want to talk through them, that is a service that they can. Yeah, it's within their rights to go and do that.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all until actually Illy, who you featured on your show before, she has a service where she does debriefs. For me, it was essential that it was the team that took part in my birth, but that's the only time I was aware of it. And even then, you could have had that first debrief with the doctor or nurse who wasn't part of your birth and taken that as face value, but I knew that I needed to fully have closure on it, which meant speaking to someone who is present.
Well, I mean, it's much nicer that you've had it within a shorter space of time than 4 years.
Yeah, but definitely closure though, definitely closure. It was a quick birth. And I am just so grateful that it was a safe birth because I didn't know about shoulder dystocia, and now I realise that is one of the unfortunate things that can result in you not coming home with your baby. You know, when you think of like, oh, in a normal safe birth, how can it go so wrong? That is one of the things. So I'm just very grateful.
Is motherhood what you expected it to be, Africa?
Not at all. for all the right reasons.
Mm.
I feel really fortunate to have something to remind me that I am not the center of earth, because it could get that way. You know, if life was going great for you, for example, which obviously it isn't always, it can be very easy to think about like me, how do I propel this, all of that. My children, and I'm also not a person who's like, oh, every single thing for my kids, not at all, but I'm like, wow, I've got a 5-year-old. I remember being 5. So I have to make my 5-year-old feel like it's her story. And me and Daddy are here to support you. We do have a life, not a very sociable one, but we do have a life. But I'm so glad to have a focus, like an anchor almost. That's, for me, the best part of motherhood. I see, you know, I have friends and family who are similar age to me, like in their 30s, and they are so desperate for the next best thing all the time. Whereas having children has allowed us to be like, wow, we're so fortunate that we're able to live in this lovely 2-bedroom flat in a lovely part of London that's down the road from mum, down the road from siblings. Whereas I think without kids, I'd have this pressure of like, I must have this, I must have that. Whereas we're just grateful for what our surroundings have allowed us to do and have allowed our children to do. So yeah, it's been really grounding to be a mum.
Yeah.
I'm really, as I say, we're not big on like gender or anything like that, but I'm really excited to have a son, because it's very easy to be like, oh, have daughters and empower them and do all the opposites of what we've done. But what do you do when you've got both?
Yeah.
So I'm
There's a
excited
great
for that
picture I
challenge.
can remember seeing of a mum and a little girl and a little boy, and the little girl is wearing a top that says something like "the future is women," something like that, and the little boy is just looking over, really confused. And I just think, as a mother of boys, that image is in my head, because it's so important now that we think about how we raise them. What do we show them, especially everything that's been happening the last couple of weeks and all those sort of things that it's brought up. You know, it's completely changed the landscape in terms of how we bring up boys, because we are empowering girls so much. So it's empowering girls, but we can't therefore take the power away from boys. It's got to be an equality thing and a respect thing for everyone, you know. And it's going to be an interesting one, I think.
Definitely.
But being aware of it and all the things that we're saying to them, you know, making sure that they can cry and they can do all of that stuff.
We felt confident in the way that we were trying to raise our daughters.
Yeah.
Whereas now with a son, that is a challenge. So we're excited to have to learn how we can do those two things simultaneously. Because as you say, that image, I can just imagine it already.
Yeah. Yeah. If you were going to write a letter on motherhood, who would it be to and what would it say? You can write to anyone. You can write to a phone, you can write to a breast pump, you can write to your boobs, you can write to your mum, yourself, your kids, your husband, whatever, whoever you like.
I would write to all the underrepresented mothers. That isn't mums who look like me, that's anyone who doesn't see themselves in any way, shape or form. And I would say that by you being you, somebody's seeing you. I felt very validated seeing another mum not taking it in her stride on the bus, for example. That made me feel okay.
Yeah.
Because we don't see that side of it. So I would write to anybody who doesn't feel like they see themselves, and just remind them that them being them is so empowering to other people who don't have it super easy.
Yeah. It's like when anyone ever shares anything that they feel is a vulnerability or a weakness or something that they failed at, actually, it's so impactful and powerful to other people that are feeling it.
Yeah, definitely.
I have 3 sentences that I would love you to finish. Being a mum means...
It's not just about you.
Since having children,
never get to have a bath.
And I'm happy when.
Ooh. I'm happy when I take stock of what I've got.
Thank you. That's so lovely. Africa, it's been a pure delight to talk to you about your experiences of motherhood.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thank you.